I ran so quickly my foot ripped against the ground in front of his room and I almost ended up over the railing. An adrenaline-fueled race, heart pounding in my chest, a sense of urgency pushing me forward. I completed my fall a few meters lower, the shock of impact resonating through my body. Without a second thought, I immediately opened the door, bracing myself for what could be lurking within. But there was nothing there. No Bobby, no monster. Just an empty room filled with an eerie silence that was somehow more unsettling than the chaos I'd expected. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly replaced by a creeping sense of confusion. Was it all in my head? Was I losing my mind? I was on the verge of convincing myself that it was all just an overactive imagination when I heard it. The voice. It came from the frame on the wall just in front of me. A voice filled with pain, pleading, "I'm not gonna hurt you. Remove this frame. It hurts me." My body froze, paralyzed by fear. My eyes were drawn to something protruding from the right of the frame. It was rough, and in the dim light, it looked like human skin. The sight sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't look away. I knew I had to see what it was. Summoning up the courage, I grabbed the broom that was behind me, waving my sleeve in its direction. The handle of my broom was just under the frame, ready to reveal the unknown. But just as I was about to remove it, my mother appeared behind me, her voice breaking the silence. "What are you doing?" In my surprise, I fell forward, dropping the broom into a deafening crash. But I quickly got back on my feet, my eyes darting back to the frame. It was as if nothing had happened. Nothing was beyond it. My curiosity at that age was as great as my pain today, that is to say, much too great for my own safety. But sometimes curiosity can lead us to discoveries that are far from comforting. Before I managed to remove the frame, my mother appeared behind me. Her voice pierced the silence like a gunshot. I jumped, losing my grip on the broom handle. It clattered to the floor with a crash that echoed through the eerily quiet room. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice laced with that unique mixture of concern and annoyance only a mother can muster. I scrambled for an explanation, my mind racing. "I was just cleaning Bobby's room," I stammered, riding the broom and gesturing vaguely around the room. My mother raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking from me to the frame and back again. She opened her mouth to say something else, but then, mercifully, she simply shook her head, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Darling, what are you doing here?" she asked, her tone light, playful even. I exhaled, relief washing over me. Staring again at the frame in front of me, but now nothing was beyond it. It was at that moment when I negotiated the room. In the throes of fear and curiosity, the decision to switch rooms with Bobby was both strategic and foolhardy. The cracked room with its eerie frame and questionable inhabitant was far from appealing. But the need to protect Bobby from the monster in the wall was stronger than any sense of self-preservation. A clever ruse was needed. Playing down the creepy aesthetic of the room and claiming a preference for it over mine, I managed to convince our dear mother of the room switch. The truth of the matter was starkly different. I wanted to be the barrier, the shield that stood between Bobby and the entity in the wall. But such a decision came with a heavy cost. The need to keep the secret, to bear the burden of the monster alone, was a daunting task. There was no one to share this nightmare with, no one to validate the terror that lurked in the room. And without tangible proof, who would believe a boy's tall tale about a monster in the wall? Yet it was this very isolation that fueled a reckless courage. The entity seemed to manifest only near its chosen one. The room was now mine, and I was the chosen one. I dismissed my mother politely and took possession of Bobby's room. The anticipation was palpable, the weight excruciating. The day wore on, and as evening approached, the creature made its presence known again. Its plea to remove the frame echoed in the room, a chilling reminder of the reality I was now part of. Armed with the broom as the only line of defense, I prepared myself mentally for the monstrous revelation. My young age made me courageous and too reckless. But it was this very courage and recklessness that kept me grounded, that kept me from screaming in terror as the face behind the frame smiled back at me. It was shortly before the evening meal that the creature appeared again. The voice, so chilling in its familiarity, echoed through the room, emanating from the frame on the wall. It was as if the air itself had turned icy, the atmosphere heavy with an ominous sense of dread. A shiver ran down my spine, my heart pounded in my chest like a drum. Please remove this frame, it pleaded. The entity, so eerily human yet terrifyingly alien, was back. Its voice was a mournful melody, a symphony of sorrow and pain. The frame, once just an ordinary household item, was now a portal to the unknown, a gateway to a world beyond our comprehension. Yet despite the terror that gripped me, I was determined. I had a mission, a purpose. I was there to protect Bobby, my brother, from this malevolent force. I grabbed the broom, my makeshift weapon, and positioned it under the frame, preparing myself for the worst. My hands were shaking, but I held on, my resolve stronger than my fear. The entity kept beckoning me. "Come closer," it coaxed. Its voice was soft, almost soothing, like a lullaby sung by a mother to her child. But I wasn't fooled. I knew better than to trust this entity, this creature from beyond the frame. I was a mere 14 years old, but I was not naive. I knew danger when I saw it, so I kept my distance. I stood my ground, refusing to give in to its persistent pleas. My heart was racing, my palms were sweaty, but I didn't move. I was like a statue, frozen in place by fear and determination. The entity continued its attempt to lure me closer, but I remained steadfast. I was not about to let my guard down, not about to risk my life or Bobby's. The monster in the wall could wait a long time, for I had absolutely no intention of heeding its calls. Although I was 14 years old, I was far from being naive enough to do that. I spoke in a low voice with him for almost an hour. That's right, an hour spent in hushed whispers with an entity that had no place in our mundane reality, a creature who seemed as much a part of the wall as the paint that covered it. I was far from naive, but the curiosity of youth had me entranced, riveted to the spot despite my fear. The questions flowed from me like a river, each one a desperate attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you want? Each question hung in the air, echoing off the walls of the room, yet the entity remained enigmatic, its answers as elusive as its origin. Yet despite the creature's refusal to offer clarity, it was insistent on one thing. "Come closer," it would repeat, its voice a mournful echo wrapped in a shroud of mystery. But I was no fool. I knew better than to heed its call. The entity might have been trapped in the wall, but I had no intentions of becoming its captive audience. The unanswered questions hung heavy in the room, a silent testament to the enigma that had made itself at home in our lives. His face, a grotesque mask that had somehow managed to become part of the wall, was the last thing I wanted to see before falling asleep. As the day drew to a close, I found myself making a decision. I wouldn't sleep in that room. I wouldn't give the entity the satisfaction of my fear. So I formulated a plan as simple as it was effective. Instead, I spotted my mother's sleeping hours and made sure to sleep on the couch. I would avoid the room, avoid the entity, and most importantly, avoid the questions that had no answers. I would take refuge on the couch, the comfortable mundane offering a sanctuary from the inexplicable horror that had taken residence in our home. Because sometimes, the questions that can't be answered are the ones that haunt us the most. Because at that moment he was smiling at me with all his teeth. The memory still sends shivers down my spine. This tale of horror and mystery revolves around our young protagonist's courage and curiosity that led him to uncover a terrifying entity. An entity, the mystery of which remains unresolved to this day. The face that was once confined behind the frame on the wall now haunts his every waking moment. A chilling reminder of the encounter, the entity's words, "Thank you, Stan," echo in his mind. Despite the fear, our protagonist displayed a bravery that belied his age. But even with his audacity, the entity refused to share its origins, leaving behind a mystery that continues to baffle and terrify. Now, years later, the enduring fear is a constant companion. The smiling face, the unanswered questions, the unresolved mystery, they all linger. A chilling reminder of the entity that once lived in his wall. "Thank you, Stan," he said in a mournful tone as I took a step back, leaving our viewers with the chilling image of the entity's face smiling with all its teeth.